where that passion is really important is when times do get tough because, I don't care what job you have. There's going to be times where it's going to be hard. You can get through those tough times because I don't know, you still remember that you love it more than the
Yeah.
tough times. I feel like so many people just want to quit when they start something and they suck. Just embrace the suck. You're going to suck at whatever you start at. Like you're gonna
Yeah.
be terrible. That's okay.
Yeah.
No one's born doing any of these things. Well, some people are, more naturally skilled at it.
So joining me today is Sean Peterson, and he is a car designer at Ford. So Sean, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Of course. So
I'm
let's go
excited.
ahead. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So Sean, in the most simple way possible, can you please explain to me what a car designer does?
Hmm. Wow, this is a loaded question. I mean, well, it's pretty much in the name. We design cars. So, usually there's kind of specialties in the field, whether it's
Okay.
interior or exterior design. I'm an exterior designer, so I will design the outside of the car. And,
Okay.
how that process starts, usually with a sketch. So we'll draw something. It's just the fastest way to do anything. And
Yeah.
then some themes will be picked. And then from there, you go about, potentially building it in 3D, whether it's yourself or in different parts of the process, you'll give it to a modeler and they'll do it. Then from there, we'll mill it out full size, actual size of a car in clay,
Okay.
mill it out, and
Wow.
then, you'll have clay modelers come by, they'll sculpt it by hand. And yeah, it's a bit of a process, but it's kind of in the name.
Yeah.
So
Wait,
that's
and
what I do.
you said the actual size of a car in clay?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
We've tried to make attempts to, avoiding that because it's really expensive.
Yeah.
Um, to I think it's like a couple $100,000 or something ridiculous
Yeah.
for a full size clay model. Plus, you got all the
Wow.
man hours of the modelers and everything. So one
Yeah.
thing that started to happen, um, you'll see designers that will be working in VR as well. So, those
Okay.
MetaQuest goggles that you'll use.
Yeah.
So we'll
Okay.
do that. And that gives us a lot of the way there, and it saves us a lot of time and money and man
Okay.
hours. But there's still nothing to replace the clay aspect of
Yeah.
it, just because you can physically touch it. And, it's also important to just have it sit in the room with you. Because
Yeah.
sometimes, you really like something upon first impression, but then, maybe it doesn't stand the test of time where you
Hmm.
kind of get sick of it or, whatever
Yeah.
else. So it's good to like live with something. Kind of like, if
Okay.
you're in your house and then, what may have been some exciting piece after living for a while, like that's kind of
Yeah.
obnoxious. I don't know if I like this anymore.
Yeah. And so now what made you want to get into this career path and how did you get your start in it?
Yeah. It's kind of loaded there. So, I mean, I guess when I was a kid, I've always liked machines that moved. So my uncle, he was a fighter pilot. So I was
Okay.
originally into planes. And then, you come around to 16 and you're gonna get your driver's license and movies like
Yeah.
Fast and Furious come out and other things. And you're like, oh, now I'm into cars. And um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm of the opinion that, if we had, you know, infinite time, we would probably have many different careers. I mean, just
Yeah.
for me, I like to,
Yeah.
try and learn and just very creative or curious person anyway. Um, but yeah, I was originally doing industrial design. So that's product
Okay.
design. That's anything else that's not cars. So that could be your cell phone, that could be a computer mouse, could be,
Okay.
a screen or something, anything. Um, and I was doing that for a bit, but there's only a few car design schools. There's only two now in the US,
Okay.
and only a handful of other ones across the world. So it's very competitive to get in. Maybe a little less
Oh.
so now. I feel like schools are getting a little money hungry, but that's another topic.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know. There was a sense for me where, I didn't really dabble into too much art in high school, and so I didn't think I
Okay.
was good enough to do that. And then after diving into industrial design in college, I built up a skill set where it's like, oh, I can do this.
Yeah.
And from there, I looked into Art Center, which happened to be 5 minutes away from my place. I always knew about it. Um, and really, I just couldn't deny it anymore. I was like, okay, I have to give this a shot, and built a
Yeah.
portfolio up, and here I am.
Wow. And so now going into your job specifically, what parts of your job are the most exciting or the most interesting to you?
Uh, the most exciting is, I don't know, I'd say the creative process.
Okay.
Um, Trying to tell a story of a brand or what the product is supposed to be, and
Yeah.
just finding the early part of it and doing just this pure statement, and where it's like headphones on like this, and just no one bother me, let me just come up with this thing. And I don't know,
Yeah.
that stuff, that's when it gets really exciting, where you'll start off in the morning and you'll just plug away, and you're like, oh, okay, work's over. You're like, what? Where did the time go? So that's exciting. And then actually seeing it full size and real.
Yeah.
um just, at the end of the day, it's as much fun as it is to have something where it's just this pure imagination thing. I think everyone in my industry wants to see something that's real and something that's
Mhm.
remembered. So
Yeah.
that's me anyway.
Yeah. And so now kind of on the flip side, what parts of your job do you think are harder, emotionally challenging, or maybe just not so fun?
Uh, okay. I'd say two things. So one of the harder things is when you actually do get into production spot,
Okay.
you it can be a little tedious. Like, you're dealing with millimeters of moving something. So for
Mm.
example, there was one point, we're not always doing something sexy like designing the whole outside of the car all the time. Sometimes you got to do the little things. So there was one
Yeah.
point where I had to design an antenna for a car. And
Okay.
originally, it was like a massive thing. And so I was talking to some engineer, like, why is this even a project? Because
Yeah.
you look at Tesla, they don't even have antennas. And apparently, probably shouldn't have said that, because that was that guy's job.
Oh.
So my boss is like, yeah, you're basically saying his job shouldn't exist. I'm like, well, I didn't think
Ooh.
about it like that. But yeah, so anyway, I remember fighting to, get this thing to read right, the highlights to go the right way. And then my boss, he came up to me and he shows me the antenna, and I didn't realize, but it was the size of like one of those pearl erasers.
Hmm.
And then you're just thinking, like, why was I fighting? Why was I
Yeah.
fighting so hard for something like this? And you're doing it for months and moving little millimeters. So I don't know, for maybe like the bigger aspect, that sweating those details can be cool, but it's
Okay.
just, it takes so much time to, get
Yeah.
there. And I mean, really, the other than that, the hardest thing, and I think this could be for any job, is, it's like, who are you working with? You
Yeah.
hope you're working with someone, some people you really gel with. And I don't know, I was really lucky. One of the first teams I was on at Ford, um, they're still my friends. We were just actually at a
Wow.
party last night. Um,
Fun.
but yeah, we hang out every weekend.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing working with them. And then sometimes you work with people who are a
Different.
little more negative, a little different, and
Yeah.
that makes it not as fun. So,
Yeah. And so now, what do you think that people might underestimate or overestimate about being a car designer?
well, I'd say the money that probably costs to get into it.
Okay.
So that would be an underestimation, maybe. I mean, you see the price, and the issue right now is, at least in the US, the schools are teaching it are private schools.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's a business at the end of the day, and you're selling a
Yeah.
dream.
Yeah.
And it's a cool dream. It's an exciting dream. And so you can kind of charge probably more than you should.
Yeah.
So, like, for me, I one of the reasons I didn't immediately try to go to art center, which is where I went, was because I knew it was very expensive.
Hmm.
And my family did well for themselves, but even so, it's just
Ooh,
so
yeah,
unattainable.
yeah.
And I had to get a scholarship. So, and that's what I would recommend for anybody, unless you're just rolling in dough and can throw away anything, then yeah, sure, go it. But yeah, I remember developing a portfolio, and my whole thing was like, hey, I'm doing this outside of my industrial design degree. And so
Yeah,
if I'm going to really do this, I have a short time window. So whatever homework assignment I was given, I was like, I'm going to do 4x. So four times the amount of work. If they ask for 10 pages of sketches, I'm going to do 40. If
yeah,
they ask for whatever, 4x. And
yeah.
that worked for me. So instead of having what some people ended up graduating with $250,000, which
Wow.
don't do that. Don't be that guy. Yeah, it was 110. So
Okay.
still a lot. And especially for how much maybe you're getting at first,
Yeah.
maybe not necessarily worth it. I'm getting paid pretty well now, but
Okay.
and I mean, it's a cool gig. Like, you're doing fun, creative stuff all the time with
Yeah.
like-minded people, and the pay is still pretty good. But,
Okay.
you know, I I can't imagine going to school and having $250,000 in loans and you're not a
Yeah.
doctor
Yeah.
or, someone with that kind of earning potential, just because
Yeah.
you've to me, um, I'm a huge advocate for, you know, find different ways to make money. We can get into more of that, but I Airbnb my house, I rent out my
Okay.
car, I do all this other stuff, and really it's just the freedom aspect. You don't ever want to feel like you're shackled to anything.
And so now going into the financial aspect, I did actually have to look up the average salary for a car designer. And so according to Google, it is about $60,000. So do you think that that's accurate? Is that more of a starting average? What does that look like?
So it depends on where you work. In the
Yeah, of
US,
course.
you get paid a bit more for sure.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, if it was 60K, I'd be looking
Okay.
for something else.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, thankfully I don't take 60K. But um, and I mean it just depends on what part of the world
Yeah,
you're
of
in,
course.
because some parts that's doable.
Yeah.
And luckily, Michigan, you know, I mean, I probably shouldn't even say this. I don't know how big the bandwidth of your audience is, but it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool state, and it's pretty underrated. I think
Okay.
everyone freaked out with the whole Detroit thing back in like the
Yeah.
90s, but you actually go there, and sure, some of the things are true, but I'm from LA originally, and
Okay.
there's some, maybe not the best areas there too, but
Yeah.
it's a beautiful state and beautiful city. Um, it's kind of like this little hidden gem. So I don't know. You do live a pretty good life
Okay.
with a car design salary, at least in Michigan. I will say, um, some of my design friends in California, they make
Mm,
about the same amount, but it's significantly more expensive. So
yeah.
you would probably be expecting to live more of a college lifestyle, apartment,
Okay.
dorm style living, which,
Yeah.
is cool, but I'm 36. So I,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not for me anymore.
Okay. And so now we talked about that there's the exterior side and then the interior side of design, but within just car designing, are there specific niches or specialties that you can choose to go into besides those two?
Uh, I mean, it's really those two. However, there are, I guess, little niches in those niches.
Okay.
So, um, okay, for example, there's, component design. So if you're interior, it would be like the door, like window switches,
Yeah.
or the, knobs in, the infotainment unit and all that kind of stuff. Or for exterior, some people specialize in lighting, that can be really complicated.
Okay.
Because not only does it have to, look good, but it has to abide by all these different standards for, emitting light. You can't just have a
Okay.
headlight where you can't see
Yeah.
what's in the road. And we constantly make it difficult for ourselves to package these things and do all this stuff. So it's oh, also there's, wheel design too, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But yeah, there's more specific things, but out of school, what you're going to do is, usually when you're in school, you're specialized in one thing or the other, exterior or interior design.
Okay. I see.
So yeah, that's kind of
Yeah.
it.
Okay, so now this next question is a little bit not very adequate for this job just because I feel like we all know, but who are some of the biggest employers of this industry?
Uh, yeah, I mean, well, Ford's one of them.
Yeah.
So Ford, GM, and well, Stellantis, which is a group, like that's like Dodge, Chrysler, whatever, and a bunch of other
Yeah.
companies. Those are the biggest ones in the US.
Okay.
Um, I mean, you also have Tesla too. That also counts in the US.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, that's one thing that's kind of cool about working in the industry. If people ask you like, oh, so like, what do you do? Who do you work for? You're like, oh, I'm a car designer. I work for Ford. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Well,
everyone knows.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
unless if it's like a startup, an electric startup, some people might not know. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of big names, a lot of big
Yeah.
players, and I guess it depends on what you want to do, like
Okay.
what your values are. So, for example, I have some friends, they worked for Ford and they went over to Mack Truck. So this is like big rigs, that kind of thing, 18 wheelers. And
Wow.
they I don't know, they wanted, they missed that sunshine, which, over there, that's I think it was North Carolina is where they're at. And
Okay.
so, they get a little bit more of that. And for them, their family was there. And um, I don't know, there can be a lot of
Okay.
pressure and competition in traditional OEMs. They're a sought after job, and you usually have a lot of different designers competing on one project. And
Okay.
it's a weird thing because, we're a team but we're also competing, and
Mm.
there's kind of one winner.
Okay.
So, but sometimes they'll grab from different ones, and you ultimately all help out and execute and do the thing. Um, but yeah, it just depends on what your goals are. And so for a couple of my friends, who went down to Mack Truck, they wanted a bit more of that life balance where they're enjoying themselves a bit more maybe on the weekend, and not as stressed, and um
Yeah.
putting all their energy there. So it just depends on what you want to do.
Okay. And now just out of curiosity, so you said that the designers compete against each other. So how does that work? Is it like someone comes to you or to you guys with like a case and then you all like design your own thing and then present it to someone and they pick and choose, or how does that work?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So let's say, for example, I was designing a Ford Bronco. So we
Okay.
kind of have a good idea of what that is now. There's, a general package. So it's like, okay, well, here's where the wheels are, here's where the engine is, here's where people sit, there's vision
Okay.
angles, all this stuff. So a lot of that stuff is predetermined. Unless if it's an all new product, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room just
Okay.
because the engineering has already been done. Now, maybe prior to like the 60s and previously, you know, there was a lot more room to mess
Okay.
with proportion and do all that.
Yeah.
But now you're kind of, yeah, I don't want to like demean it. There's a lot more work that goes on behind the scenes, but you're kind of putting the wrapper over
Okay.
whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so you're given the package and you're gonna have a team of people. The team I'm on right now, there's four, now five, I think soon to be six people.
Okay.
Very small. I've been on teams where it would be seven exterior designers. Right now we have two.
Wow.
So, and I've heard other stories where people there'll be like 14, and so it's 14 competing for one theme, one sketch overall design gets picked.
Wow.
Um, and the person doing the picking, so I'm a designer, and then you have a manager, which is, they're kind of overseeing and making sure, we're on target,
Yeah.
meeting these deadlines. And then you have a director at the highest level, there's chief and other things, but director ultimately, picks the design. And
Okay.
just depending on how your company works, maybe they'll make scale models. So like I was saying with the clay, they'll do full
Yeah.
size, but sometimes, the old way of doing it was you'd make smaller clay models. They're called usually like fifth scale, so one-fifth the
Okay.
size of a normal one.
Okay.
It allows you to, keep ideating and keep making changes and refinement quickly since it's much
Mm-hmm.
smaller and you
Yeah.
get a general idea. Um, but yeah, so usually they'll pick a few themes, they'll make it, scale and then full size, and then have them compete until a certain checkpoint, and then from there they pick one and
Wow. Wow. Okay. So now, what are some current trends or challenges in this industry, and how do you see it changing in, say, 5 to 10 years?
I'd say the biggest challenge right now is making electric cars a thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Tesla, if it wasn't for Tesla, I don't know if we would be really having electric cars. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's somewhat easy to understand why. There's a lot of really good things about electric cars. I mean, they're super
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah.
They're quiet, which for a lot of people is great.
Yeah.
Um, and it's I mean, hell, I want an electric car. Um, but the issue is right now batteries are so expensive. Um, and it's for the traditional automakers, it's not really profitable at all.
Yeah.
Now Tesla, they've kind of gotten away with it because they had the since they started from zero, they were able to do things like vertical integration. So
Okay.
this is actually, Elon in some ways is kind of like a Henry Ford. I don't know if
Okay.
you would necessarily it's a good comparison, but they both did this vertical integration where, prior or Ford now and a lot of OEMs now, they kind of have parts made by all sorts of different suppliers.
Okay.
And this raises the cost because, they're trying to get a little bit of profit, but it also, makes you a little bit more nimble and makes you not have to have all this like giant workforce. And, so there's reasons why it kind of went
Yeah.
that way. But because Tesla builds everything in-house, they can make things for significantly cheaper. And they do things that are really smart. Like they were the first ones to make something called a gigapress. So normally
Okay.
there's a frame. So this is the skeleton of a car, and it's made up of all these different little pieces. Well, the more pieces there are, the more expensive it is because you have to have all these tools make each individual piece.
Yeah.
So, for
Yeah.
example, to like stamp a door, um, like the door itself is just a piece of sheet metal. It's not that expensive, but the stamping tool, it's this giant machine, and it's
Wow.
really cool. If you go to was it Dearborn, you can see like a tour of some of these machines working
Wow.
in the factory. But the tool itself is millions and millions of dollars, and
Yeah.
so it's like, okay, this is where the cost comes in. So that's why uh you know like a Ford Focus or something is cheaper than you know um a Ferrari or Corvette or something. Not just because, I mean, granted, some of the materials for the more higher end cars are more expensive, but there's less volume.
Okay.
So since you're making hundreds of thousands of Focuses, then you're able to bring down the price because the cost of the tool, you're paying off the cost of the tool, the labor,
Right.
and all that stuff. And so that
Right.
brings down the cost. Whereas, Ferrari, there's only a few hundred or whatever that they make. So that's why they're part of the reason why they're so expensive,
Yeah.
because you got to pay for all this other stuff. But anyway, I know I went off,
No worries.
but yeah, so that's one of the biggest challenges is electrification in the industry. And the other question was, what sort of new technologies are we using?
Just how do you see it evolving? How do you see the industry evolving? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think definitely more vertical integration. How do we be much smarter about the tools that we're using?
Okay.
So that way we can, decrease the cost of these things, especially right now in this early adoption phase.
Mm,
That's what any traditional automaker is thinking about right now is like, hey, how do we actually make money with these? Because, at
yeah.
the end of the day, it's a business. And if you don't make money, everyone's without a job.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a challenge. And, for my job specifically, um, one of the biggest challenges is, new tool sets. So, in the 90s, 90s and prior, all anyone had was pencil, some markers,
Yeah.
and chalk, and that's it.
Yeah.
That was the car design process. But now
Okay.
of course, you have Photoshop, but that's been around for a bit. Now you have programs like Blender. So that's like a 3D software that's
Okay.
free. And so designers are increasingly being encouraged to learn how to do not only just 2D stuff, which that's always been an emphasis, but then more and more getting into the 3D end of it, which
Mm,
in school, you're all taught 2D stuff. And now when you're a professional, I mean, it's a three-dimensional sculpture, so you gotta know.
yeah.
So you gotta learn all this. And then you also have, AI, which,
Mm-hmm.
you want to use that as a tool as well. And it's all about, knowing when to use what tool at what part of the process.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, it can be a lot. It's a lot more complicated than it once was, and probably more
Yeah.
complicated than it needs to be.
Okay. And so now, how do you see that you stay updated with the latest developments of your field?
I mean, for me, I don't know, a bit of a car nerd, obviously. So I'll just, read whatever is on like Car Scoops or Jalopnik or,
Okay.
some car site. Um, but that helps me stay informed about the industry,
Okay.
and see what other competitors are doing and all that. But for the design side, the artistic side, I'll go on Pinterest. So there's a bunch of different images on there, or actually Instagram too. Like
Okay.
everyone's posting things on there, and I
Yeah.
constantly am saving new ideas, um, just to possibly rip. And I don't know, what's really interesting is, I mean, that's kind of what AI does to learn is you just plug in a bunch of images
Yeah.
and it feeds it, and then it comes up with, new ideas and new ways of interpreting it. And,
Yeah.
that's the way our brain works. And that's how you come up with new designs is just exposure to new ideas.
Yeah.
And that's why companies have more than one designer. Because, everyone filters their life in a unique way.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way I perceive and will draw a Ford Bronco is going to be very different than someone who's sitting next to me
Yeah.
over here, or in a California studio or whatever.
Yeah.
And you know just having those brains sort of bounce ideas off of each other, that's, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So now kind of going into your daily work, what does your schedule look like and what tasks do you spend the majority of your day doing?
uh I guess depends on the day. It depends on the part of the process you're in. So if you're the beginning part of the process is just sketching, so ideating. It could be like on a little post-it note, and
Okay.
I find that really an efficient method. I picked that up when I was an internship at BMW, and it was
Oh,
cool
wow.
just because you're just coming up with these little, like, kind of ugly sketches, but it was just you're just spilling out ideas on paper.
Yeah.
And once you get done with that part of the process, and you find those little nuggets where, like, oh, okay, this is something new, this is a new take, then you'll move on to more refined stage. And I'll throw it into a 3D program and then start to build it and
Okay.
craft it there. And then I'm like, okay, well, I kind of like this, but then I'll throw that 3D, model back into Photoshop or something and sketch over that and come up with some more ideas.
Okay.
And it's really a never-ending process. Like I've heard someone describe designers that were kind of like beavers, which is going to be a weird thing
Okay.
to say, but it's just like, beavers, they chop wood and they make a dam, and like they don't know when to stop. Like they
Yeah.
just keep building. And it's like, bro, you plugged up the whole river. Like you can stop.
Yeah.
But there's really no endpoint, which is exciting.
Okay.
Um, and really, I mean, your endpoint is, as one of my teachers once said, it's not done, it's due. So
I
you
see.
can
Yeah.
the way you will perceive a project is going to be very different today than it would be 10 years from now. And that's
Yeah.
because you change as a person, the way you view things is, different. Kind of like when you listen to an artist, a musician that you really like, and their sound changes and adapts over time.
Yeah. Okay. And so would you say that this is kind of like a flexible or like remote friendly job, or do you have to be in the office from 9 to 5? What does that part of your schedule kind of look like?
Depends on the company.
Okay.
So I hate saying that, but yeah, it depends.
But it's true, yeah.
Yeah, and actually, it's sometimes depends on what team you're on. So, for
Okay.
example, like at Ford, I got a couple friends. They're in, you know, typical 8 to 5, 9 to 5, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but in every day. And then my team, we're in, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but then Monday,
Okay.
Friday we work from home, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, and also I think it helps to just you can kind of get in a different mental framework, working
Okay.
from home, and less
Yeah.
distractions, and so you can focus, and just depending on your personality type, maybe it helps, maybe it hurts.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just depends on your team.
Okay. And would you say that there are any busy seasons as part of this job? And if so, what are
Um, it's not it's not like seasonal, like, oh, it's winter, so this is crunch time.
they?
Uh,
Okay.
it's it just depends on what part of the project you're in, and sometimes uh there's lulls in the studio where there won't be many projects, like
Okay.
there'll be sort of like a feast or famine type thing. So there's some points where it's just the whole studio is just constantly noisy. Mills are going around doing all this stuff, and there's just too many projects, too many fires going on all at the same
Yeah.
time. And then there's other times where it's just quiet and you're kind of waiting for the next thing. And you still get put to work and doing other little
Yeah.
things here and there. But yeah, sometimes I don't know, there's a bit of a breather, and
Okay.
they're trying to organize and figure out, okay, how did this previous project do? How do we want to change, the next time, next go around? Or maybe
Hmm.
there isn't a business case anymore. Like I've seen programs that get all the way to the end, and like right when they're about to start making tools so that we can actually stamp it, they get canceled, which that's the most heartbreaking thing is,
Yeah.
for anyone who's been on these programs, it takes some time to make a car. Um,
Hmm.
it takes like 3 years, 2 or 3
Wow.
years to make a car. And,
Okay.
if you put in the time and energy it takes to win and get it done, and, all these hours, after, traditional work hours, and then something
Yeah.
like that happens, that can be tough. So,
Yeah. And is the 2 to 3 years, is that just the design process, or is that like start to finish the car is ready?
I mean, I haven't been on a whole lot of production programs, so I'm trying to
Okay.
like answer it specifically. Um, I mean, yeah, I'd say it's the design process.
Okay. Wow.
There's been attempts to shorten it, and it's definitely helped with 3D modeling tools, like Poly One specifically. That's definitely shortened it. Things with VR have shortened it. I can
Okay.
tell you now, we are working. much faster, at least twice as fast, maybe even three times as
Oh,
fast as we did when I first came to Ford.
okay.
Um,
Wow.
and it's just, because the tools have gotten easier.
Yeah.
Not, I mean, it still requires the same amount of effort, but it's easier to do certain tasks. One thing that's interesting about that too is really it's like a year or so of, the fun ideation, like exploring, like where are we gonna go? And then the bulk
Yeah.
of the time feels like it's the execution part. So it's
Okay.
working with engineers and being like, okay, so we're trying to develop this idea, but then, you've got cooling requirements. So it's like, okay, the intake has to be this big now, and
Mm,
suspension is this high. So we have to raise up the hood for pedestrian impact. Um, or I mean, even just without all that other stuff, just executing. We
yeah.
spend so much time trying to get highlights to be right, or like lines to look good in every angle. Like sometimes there'll be like
Wow.
weird wobbles. Like for example, one
Yeah.
thing that's weird when you before you get in the industry and before you get in design school, like on a car, you never see a straight line. There'll be lines
Yeah.
like even on boxy cars, like if you go outside and look at a Bronco, look at a Range Rover, look at whatever, they're never perfectly flat.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
it just like the like columns in like a Roman,
Hmm.
building,
Wow.
there's always a little bit of crown, is what we call it. So a little bit of
Okay.
positive shape. And it's because, from far away, if you don't have just a little bit of that crown, it actually looks negative and it looks weak.
Wow.
Um, and just having a little bit of positive makes it appear flat, even though it's not. So
Wow.
these are like weird little things. And it's like how much like we notice it. I notice it because I do this every day.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's one of those things where maybe the public, maybe you don't notice it so much, but if you
Okay.
saw it without it, it would appear wrong. It would appear not
Yeah.
natural.
Yeah. That makes sense. And so now kind of diving into specific skills and knowledge, are certain degrees or certifications truly required to become a car designer?
At present day, I'd say yes.
Okay.
I hope in the future that's not the case, just because I know I struggled to try and get to that point,
Yeah.
and I know other people where I have one friend, I'd say he's more talented than me, and he wasn't able to go to the design school that he wanted to go
Mm,
to just because money's a thing. I with platforms like YouTube, and so many other online academies, whatever, mine
yeah.
included. I'm not gonna plug it, but
You can. You can.
yeah, well, if you want to learn a little bit about car design, you can go to lumendesignacademy.com. That's my site.
Perfect.
Um,
Perfect.
I mean, granted, feel free, message me on, LinkedIn or Instagram. And if you have any questions about like how to be a designer or what path to take, I can help guide you there. Um,
Perfect.
so yeah, maybe my courses might not help you. I mean, you're not necessarily going to get a design job doing what I do just from the courses, but it's going to definitely improve your skill, probably give you a
Okay.
scholarship,
Ooh.
and probably help you at work take your skill set to another level, better understanding. Anyway, I really hope that more schools like that start to become a bigger thing.
Okay.
Um, just because, you know, I don't know, I'm a huge advocate of I want to, give everyone the opportunity to, compete.
Yeah.
And, right now it doesn't feel like everyone can have that opportunity.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully online just kind of is able to bring down those barriers, and it's less about, oh, look how nice my campus is, and more about,
Yeah.
hey, if you have the willingness and drive to learn, you can.
Yeah. I completely agree. So now, what are some natural strengths or talents that you think would make someone a good car designer?
I mean, it's interesting because I think there's almost kind of two types of car designers. There's ones that are like super into cars and they're just like total car nerds. And that helps a little bit, but I tend to find that people who just, I don't know, appreciate beautiful things, I guess, or
Yeah.
they like the process of it. That's probably a better part of it.
Okay.
They tend to do better and have more original, fresh ideas. So, for example, if you're want to be a cook, like just because you like to eat food doesn't mean that you're going to be a good cook.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
enjoy making it and like
Yeah.
experimenting and like, oh, well, hey, if I put, this spice in here with this lemon or whatever, it's going to bring out
Yeah.
these notes. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about because
No, that's a great metaphor though.
yeah,
It's
I
just,
mean,
yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
you got to enjoy the process of doing it. So yeah, if you want to buy cars, if you enjoy cars, enjoy the way they look, um, but you just want to own them and drive them, don't be a car designer. I mean,
Okay.
do something else. Um,
Okay.
just because it's like, no, you want to eat the food. You don't want to be the
Yeah.
cook.
Yeah.
And it's a different thing. And I will say, with whatever passion it is, if you can like sit down and, like I was saying earlier, just sort of forget what time it is and you just plug away and it just feels like you can't even breathe, like you just completely sucked into it, then yeah, it's probably a good career for you. Or,
Yeah.
if it's something where if you didn't have to make money, if yeah, I mean, I'll do a lot of projects, that are just for fun outside of work.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you can just do it for free and enjoyment, it's probably a good career path because you'll have the
Yeah.
passion for it. And where that passion is really important is when times do get tough because, I don't care what job you have, there's going to be times where it's going to be hard,
Yeah.
but, you can get through those tough times because I don't know, you still remember that you love it more than the
Yeah.
tough times
Yeah.
anyway.
So now we kind of touched on this a little bit, but what tools or technologies or softwares do you use a lot as part of your job?
I'm kind of infamous, famous, whatever you want to say, for using Blender.
Okay.
So that's a 3D software.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, some people don't know, but I actually still use Photoshop. I still sketch and do 2D and all this stuff. Um, but I think that I don't know, in my industry, some people see me as this Blender guy, and
Okay.
it's because my Instagram account, like that's posting on there because I got my little business and got the design school, um, and really it's just, I mean, that all came from actually COVID.
Oh
Um,
wow. Okay.
just like, hey, I can either learn how to do this thing that looks really cool and interesting, or maybe I should just keep drinking. So like, what am I gonna do? So yeah, but who knows? Who knows what tools are going to be popular in the
Yeah.
future? And I like to look at it like maybe woodworking or something, where it's like, okay, what tool do you use for what part of the job? So if you're going to cut some piece of wood like in half, I mean, maybe you can use an axe. Like maybe you can just chip away with it like a screwdriver and a hammer. Like you could do it. It's a terrible tool for that. But yeah, just take it to a table saw and then shut. Or, sometimes, you'll see people and they'll be, it would be like using sandpaper and you're doing like the
Okay.
final details and trying to flush it out when it's like, no, you're supposed to be using, some intense like power tool just to get it in the right ballpark.
Yeah.
So it's using the right tool at the right time. And,
Okay.
with AI, it, who knows what tools we're going to be using in the future. But what I encourage, for others, and I've had to learn myself, is just because you finish school does not mean you're done learning. And it never ends.
Yeah.
You're always going to be learning something. You need to stay open, um, if you want to continue to be successful and relevant.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we talked a little bit about how important it is to enjoy the process, but what do you recommend that candidates that are interested in this job do to set themselves apart from other candidates?
It's hard, just because there's so many different ways,
Yeah.
or well, one, so much competition and ways you can go about things. I would say, just whatever, maybe weaknesses you have, try and tackle those too. But uh, I mean, play to your strengths. Uh, like I don't know, this tool like Blender that was 3D used to be a weakness of mine.
Okay.
So it was not something I was good at. I would be intimidated by it. It's just, you open up program and there's just so many different choices and things and what you can do. And I just had no idea where to even start. Um, but I think it's more of a mindset.
Okay.
So you gotta, I feel like so many people just want to quit when they start something and they suck. And I like to just say, just embrace the suck. You're going to suck at whatever you start at. Like you're gonna
Yeah.
be terrible. And that's okay.
Yeah.
No one's born doing any of these things. Well, some people are, more naturally skilled at it. Um, and that's infinitely more helpful if you
Yeah.
put the work and energy to it. But just know it's like, hey, it's going to be hard. Um, just like things you did when you were in elementary school or whatever.
Hmm.
And just know it's just with time and practice, you're going to get better at it. And then when you get better at it, then it becomes fun. So you gotta fight through that
Yeah.
part.
Okay. So now if someone wants to make a pivot from another career into this one, what do you recommend they do in order to get their foot in the door?
Okay, well, I mean, you got to go design school. So there's
Okay.
no way around it. I would highly
Yeah.
recommend getting a scholarship of some sort. And to do that, you would attend some night course. So Art Center has like Art Center night thing. I'm pretty sure there's remote stuff
Okay.
you can do. I also teach one-on-one. So if you want to talk to me personally and like, hey, what do you think of this portfolio? We'll break it down and I can kind of uh, give you insider info on what people are looking for.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. There's no way around it, unfortunately, right
Yeah.
now. You gotta you
Go
gotta
to
go to
design
some
school.
school. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And so now, what are some books, resources, or programs, maybe even certifications that you recommend our listeners look into?
I mean, it's weird because there really isn't. I
Okay.
I mean there are sort of books. I mean, okay, my courses, they're helpful. They definitely help.
Yeah.
Other than, doing some courses, you really need there's only so much you can learn just by yourself.
Okay.
Um, so when I was doing it, I'd be taking some night course, but then I was also on Pinterest or I mean, this is pre-Instagram. So I was on Pinterest and looking up what other people were doing, like professionals, like their sketches. And
Okay.
just to improve my technique, I would do some master copies where I'm trying to get as close as I can to their techniques.
Okay.
And one thing I equate it to is it's like trying to learn a musical instrument like guitar. And this is the way I teach too, for my courses is basically learn from the masters first. So
Yeah.
learn the people you aspire to and respect, learn their techniques, and then do your own riffs,
Yeah.
then create your own work. And, sometimes there might be a little danger to that where, you know, maybe part of it starts to seep into your design work.
Yeah.
Um, but ultimately, what we were talking about earlier, you are your own unique individual. No one's going to have the same life experience as you or see things in the same way as you, whether it's a movie or a sculpture or anything.
Yeah.
And so that's your advantage is you. Like you don't
Exactly.
necessarily, need to copy these people, but what is helpful about it is you pick up the basics really fast. And
Okay.
there's a lot of weird mistakes that, a beginner might make. But by mimicking, people you respect and admire, you kind of are taking a shortcut to get there.
Okay.
So that's what I would
Yeah.
recommend for people other than taking courses is, just looking at um, other people's work and, trying to mimic that and then go off and create your own stuff. But
Yeah.
you really should have some sort of mentor or guidance, whether it's through a class or if somehow a car designer like me, then they can kind of tell you what's working and what's not.
For
Because
sure.
sometimes I've had students who are talented, um, and they're hitting a wall and they don't know what they're messing up
Yeah.
on. But if
Okay.
you have someone with, an experienced eye and who's been doing it for a while, they can tell you immediately, like, okay, you should change this, this, and this. And then they do it and they get a job, and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
like it wasn't like a million things that were wrong. There was just a few things that
Yeah.
are blocking your way. And, sometimes it can be hard to see, um, without that experience. And it's hard
Yeah.
to critique your own work and be objective about it.
Yeah. Okay, so now if you could talk to your younger self when you were just starting off in your career, what would you tell him?
It's hard. I might say relax. It's gonna be fine.
Okay.
Like you're gonna be good. But it's also weird because, having a little bit of that anxiety and stress, gets you to put in that effort,
Yeah.
um, and make it through.
Yeah.
So, uh, it's really hard to say what I would change because then, you know, would it still be me? Well, other than relax. But see, that's maybe not necessarily good advice because I was pretty motivated and pretty determined, like this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. From what I can think of off the top of my head, I don't know anyone who graduated who really put the time and energy into it who didn't make it.
Okay.
So if you do have that drive, there's nothing I could tell my past self. Like if I wanted to say like, oh dude, I don't know if you sure you want to be a car designer? Like, it's this much work and maybe you can make a little bit more money doing something else. But
Right.
I was gonna do it no matter what. Like
Yeah.
no one was gonna stop me. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the mentality that you need to have to make it in
Yeah.
this or really anything
Anything.
is
Yeah.
it's like you can't. It's okay. We're all the analogies today, but yeah, it's like you're driving home and there's some construction on the road, and you're like, okay, you don't just stop in the middle of the freeway and be like, well, I guess I'm not getting home. It's like, no, you take a different route. You have to
Right.
take whatever route, side streets, blah. It might
Yeah.
take a little bit longer, but you're going to figure out a way to get home.
Right.
And that's the same sort of mentality you have to have for this, where
Yeah.
there's going to be issues. And you know what? Those issues are actually good. Like it's good to have problems. It's good to have things that are in your way because that just means it's going to be hard for somebody else too. And
Yeah.
so if you have the strength and perseverance to push through and make it happen, then you're probably going to win more often than not because
Yeah.
someone else might see that and see that as a negative and like, well, I guess I should give up, where you could see as an opportunity like I should go on.
Exactly. Okay, that is great advice. Thank you so much for sharing. So now, finally, where can people reach out to you or where can they follow along with your work?
Yeah. All right. So I would say first place you want to go, just go to my Instagram. So it should be Lumen Design Academy. So there's an
Okay.
underscore between each word. There's like a green icon and it has the word Lumen on it. I'm
Okay.
constantly posting, new work, students' work, um, showing you little snippets of tutorials. You can also try out, uh, this course I call Blender Fundamentals is free. So is the
Okay.
program. So you can kind of see like, hey, do I like this at all?
Yeah.
Does this intrigue
Yeah.
me? Um, you know it's not a scam. So there's that. And it's you can see like, hey, does this style of learning help me or not?
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's the beautiful part of that. Or you can also follow me on LinkedIn. I mean, really, follow me on Instagram. You don't really need
Okay.
to follow me on LinkedIn unless you want to see a shot of me in a suit. I never wear a suit, but I figured like I gotta wear it for this.
Okay, well, Sean, thank you so much for joining me today. That's all that we have. Thank you for sharing your experience and all of your advice. It was greatly appreciated. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, Miranda, thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk to
Of
everybody. Hopefully, I
course.
was helpful in some way.
You were. You definitely were.
But yeah, I know it's not you probably don't come around too many car designers. So that's really cool that you're given this outlet because a lot of
Yeah.
people don't even know where to start. And to, give a voice for people in my profession or anybody else's, I'm sure that's going to be really helpful for some people
Yeah.
trying to make it whatever job. So keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
You just got one episode closer to learning about the world of jobs out there. To explore the rest of our career categories and find your best fit, go to jobdictionary.com to sign up for the beta users waitlist. Then subscribe here to find the next episodes coming out this week. And as always, drop us a comment, review, or message to let us know how we could better attune our episodes to your specific needs. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, Threads, Pinterest, and wherever else you're on socials to go get our short, snappy preview reels that expose you to new job options every day. Because here at Job Dictionary, we believe your big aha moment can be just one scroll away. Go check it out and get out there. Cheers!